Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic Recon, Testimonies from Reverts and Converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask. Please subscribe, hit the bell, visit my website, eddietrask.com, for more information about my ministry. This week's guest is Mr. Robert Tunmire. Robert, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Eddie.
Thank you for agreeing to this. Audience, just so you know, Robert was executive vice president for what's now known as Neighborly. It used to be called Dwyer Group, I believe. And he also is a board member for Man in the Mirror, which we're going to talk about later. He's also the founder or co-founder of the Central Texas Fellowship of Catholic Men. And what am I forgetting, Robert? There's another thing I was going to say.
The executive director and president of the Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance.
That's right. Very, very important. So, Robert, I'd love for you to cover your testimony front to back, and then we can get into your current endeavors.
Sure. So I'll take you back to the beginning. My grandma was born and raised here in Waco, Texas. And my dad was born here. His dad was somewhat of an alcoholic, and dad pretty much grew up on the streets. He quit high school when he was 17 years of age and joined the Marine Corps, which you could do back then. And he met my mom out in California. They were married. And I was actually born in Southern California, grew up part of my life in California and in North Carolina. We moved back and forth. My dad spent 20 years in the Marine Corps, and he was a very serious Marine. He was a machine gunner on helicopters in Vietnam, very decorated. He was a drill sergeant in San Diego. And so one of my disciplines is discipline. I'm very disciplined. And so he got out of the Marine Corps in 1973, and we moved to Waco. He spent 20 years in, and I started high school here in Waco, Texas, small community outside of Waco called China Spring. And, I was not the best child growing up. I gave my parents a fair amount of grief. And that continued when we moved to Texas. I really was not into school at all. I started working at a very young age. In fact, I got my first job when I was 15 at a hotel here in Waco. And after my freshman year of high school, I actually had two jobs. I worked at a hotel. I'd clean the bar and everything and wait bus tables from 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. And then I had another job at another restaurant here in town, the best restaurant here in town at the time. I worked from 5 till 11 o'clock at night. And so I just kind of started living my own life, frankly. And by my mid-sophomore year, I was on a pretty solid path to being dead or in jail. I mean, it was a pretty ugly road I was going down, and frankly, really didn't care. So I finished up my sophomore year of high school, and I got a call from Don Dwyer, the beginning of June of 1975. His oldest daughter and I were in the same class together. And she knew that I was a worker. I worked a lot. So her dad had just started this company in March, and he needed a hand for a day. And he called, and it happened to be a day off from my job. And so he said, I need a hand. Didn't have any idea of what he was doing, but chance to make some money. So I went over and met him, went to their office, rode over on my motorcycle, and I go inside, introduce myself, and he said, okay, come with me. I'll take you out to the job that we're doing. And I'll never forget this. He was driving a beautiful Cadillac. And Eddie, I'd never been in a Cadillac before. And it was just something that stood out to me. And he took me out to the job that was being done. And he started a business called Guarantee Carpet Cleaning and Dyeing in Waco here. And he actually was partners with a guy out of Florida. And so my job was to move the furniture and to clean the edges of the carpet. So I did that all day. And the thing that intrigued me is he said, I will pay you 10% of what we do today. Not by the hour, but 10%. So the more we did, the more I could make. So at the end of the day, I was really excited about it. It went well. And I said, look, I'll quit my other job and I'll work for you for the summer. And he said, sure. So I quit my other job and started working for him. And after about a month, I really liked what we were doing. And he kind of took me under his wing and he told me I should start reading some books. And he told me what books to read. And he told me I need to buy this program, a cassette program called Blueprint for Success. And I paid $65 to him for it. And I can remember going home and showing my parents. My dad thought I was crazy paying $65 for this program. But I dived into it. And it was really about what you need to do to be successful. And the first book he told me to read was a book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich, written about 1937 or something like that.
Wow.
So I started rewriting my story, you might say. He helped me rewrite my story. After about 30 days, I went to him and I said, hey, why don't you let me run my own route? And instead of just being a helper, I said, I can do this. And he goes, you're 16 years old. I said, doesn't matter, Don, I can do this. I'll sell my car, I'll sell my motorcycle, I'll get a van, and I can do this. And he said, okay, but I'm not going to give you any work. You're going to have to get all your own jobs. I said, no problem, I can do it. So I sold my car, sold my motorcycle, got a van, had it painted the way it needed to be painted and everything, and got my equipment and off I went. I was a technician. And by the end of that summer, I was earning net $300 to $400 every week. I turned 17 in August, and I knew I wasn't going to go to college. So back then they had a program called distributive education, which essentially means you can go to school half day and work a half day and get credit. So I would go to school from like 8 to noon, and then I'd go work. And I realized after a couple of weeks that when I was working full time during the summer, I was earning more than this teacher is earning. And I realized I can't do this for 2 more years. So I went to Don and said, Don, I want to open up a franchise. And he goes, Robert, you just turned 17. The franchise agreement wouldn't even be legally binding. I said, Don, I don't care. I can't keep doing this for 2 more years. I want to go open a franchise. So I bugged him for about a week, and he said, okay, well, let's sit down with your parents. And so I went to my mom and dad, and I said, I was talking to my dad first. And I said, Dad, I want to quit high school and I want to move to Lubbock, Texas, and open up a franchise of the company. And I want to borrow $4,000. And my dad looked at me and he goes, go talk to your mom. So I went and told my mom, and I got to hand it to my parents. I mean, I put them through some pretty serious grief, but they had faith in me. We met with Dawn, and they put up their furniture and their car as collateral for the loan. My brother was just starting college. Mom and dad didn't have a lot of money, and I had a younger sister too. And so they said, okay, this is your one chance, Robert. This is all we can do for you. So Mom went to school with me and signed me out of high school. much to the pleasure of the high school, I should say. Um, so I loaded up my equipment and what little I had, and I had $500 in my pocket. I owed money on my van. I owed $4,000 to the credit union. The franchise was $8,000. I gave Don $2,000 down, so I owed him $6,000. And so I'm driving to Lubbock, Texas, which is about 7 hours from Waco, which I'd never been to before, thinking to myself, what have I just done? I mean, Eddie, I was scared to death. I mean, just scared, but I knew that I could do it. So I went up there and just followed what I was taught to do. Funny little story though, I got there and it never occurred to me that someone won't rent you an apartment when you're 17 years of age. So I ultimately had to lie about my age to get a place to live.
Unbelievable.
So I opened up the franchise, did very well with it, and I sold it about 6 months later to a guy that had asked me about it, and I sold it for $25,000. So I realized that you can make money opening these things and selling them. So I opened up another one in Wichita Falls, Texas, built it up, only had it for a couple months and sold it for 4 times what I paid for it. And then I moved to Eugene, Oregon, because growing up, we'd been through there before and I liked it. I really wasn't from Texas. I didn't have necessarily a love for Texas. So I moved to Eugene, Oregon, and did it again, and had that one for another 6 months or so, and decided to come back to Texas. So I opened up another one in Bryan, College Station, Texas, which is about 90 miles from Waco, and lived there for about 7 years. And I got married, which is a whole different story. But anyways, was only married 5 years, no children, and did very well with that franchise. As Don started really growing the business out nationwide, he asked me if I'd come and work with him, which I really didn't have a desire to do, but I wanted to know what it was he knew. And I figured the best way to find out was really work with him. So I also built a big drive-through car wash in Bryan, College Station, Texas, first one there, and a big self-service car wash, and did very well. I mean, I was 22, 23 years of age, and by all means, very, very successful. I sold the last franchise for $100,000 before I moved back to Waco. And so moved to Waco, got a divorce, moved back to Waco, and started working with Don. Really loved what we were doing, and became his right-hand man. And he had 6 children, and I became like his oldest son, really, his oldest child, and became very, very close to him. He taught me franchising inside and out. I was president of several of the brands, and just really, really dug into what we were doing. So the flip side of it, though, is I was a pagan heathen, frankly. I'd never been baptized, no religion in my life. Don and all of his family was Catholic. So funny part is I would go to Catholic church with him sometimes on Sundays. I'd meet him and the family and go to church, and then we'd all go out to lunch. And it had no meaning to me whatsoever. It was a pure social thing, meeting him at church and going out to lunch. And so continue to live life, got married again in 86 to a lady that I'd met, and really had no business getting married. I can remember telling her before we got married, look, you got to realize the business comes first. If you ask me to pick between you and the business, I'm going to pick the business, which in hindsight, saying that to someone is about as stupid, as pagan as you can get. Why she married me was beyond comprehension. But anyway, so continued to do business, invested in a lot of real estate, and just very blessed business wise. But I worked like a maniac, and Don passed away suddenly December 4th, 1994, of a heart attack. I stepped in and was president of the company for 4 years, which was a very challenging time. We had our first child in 1991, Hunter, my oldest son, and then the second child, Jake, in July of 93. And as I started realizing that there's other things in life. It was a really turning point. One of the turning points in my life was when the first son was born. And I realized that my life is out of balance. So I decided to start scaling back my work. And then when the second one came along, even drove it home further. In fact, Don, in early 94, he asked me if I'd take over another division of the company. I said, no. I said, I can't, I don't want to work more. And I laugh about it. Next thing I know, he passes away and I got to run the whole thing. So anyways, about that time, my wife, then it was falling apart in a big way for a lot of reasons. And so I filed for divorce about the time Don passed away. Oh, man. Had a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old son. And so a lot going on, and still no God in my life. So ended up getting a divorce, and we had shared custody. So I'd have the boys from 1 week and she'd have them 1 week. And I had a full-time nanny also. So did the business, started looking at things a little differently. Was single for a number of years, raising the sons. That was my real focus. And toward the end of 98, I was thinking, I think I'm missing something here. It wasn't really like a dominant thought or anything like that.
Yeah.
And a good friend of mine, it was New Year's Day, and we were having lunch. I said, Rick, I think there's more to life than this, but I didn't know what it was. I mean, I just, didn't know. So it was the third Friday in January that year. And we had a conference out in Las Vegas that I needed to speak at. So I was going to fly out early on Friday morning. And I woke up at 3:00 in the morning. I was sleeping on my back, which I never slept on my back then. And our ceilings at the house are vaulted very high. And I was there alone, and there's this bright light at the top of the ceiling with a figure in it. And all it said was Robert. And then my whole body shook violently. And if my body wouldn't have shook violently, I would have just passed it off as a dream. But I didn't necessarily think a lot about it. So I flew to Vegas and spoke. Had a late night flight out that Friday night. And there's a magic shop over in Caesar's Palace, the Forum shops over there. So I was going to stop in and get some tricks for the boys, And so I did that. And there's an art gallery right there by it that I'd bought some art from before. So I popped into there, and I was looking at this picture, and I thought, wow, that looked great behind my desk. And sorry about that.
No problem. No problem.
Uh, so I was standing looking at this picture, and all of a sudden, a thought comes racing into my mind. You can't spend that money. It's God's money. And Eddie, I never had a thought like that in my life. Yeah, so I fly on back to Waco, and Monday morning, my assistant comes in, Linda, who'd been with me for a number of years, comes in and goes, Robert, I went to this church this weekend. It was really a great experience down on Washington Avenue. And you ought to look at going. Now, my assistant knew I didn't go to church and anything. But I thought to myself, okay, this happened Friday morning. This happened Friday evening. Here's my assistant saying this to me Monday morning, all this within like 72 hours. Now, I'm a slow learner, I have to admit sometimes, but I'm thinking to myself, well, shoot, maybe I should go to church. So the following Sunday, I went to church, Fellowship Bible Church, as an evangelical church. And it was really a neat experience. I mean, people were very friendly. The music was good. And to say that I could tell you anything that I got out of the message or anything like that, that would be a lie. But it was a nice experience. So I thought to myself, well, maybe I should go again. So I went again, and once again, very neat experience. I met the assistant pastor, name was Buck Rogers. That was his real name. And same age as I was, really a neat guy. And he said to me, he says, hey, we have a newcomers class once a month before church. You ought to look at coming. So I thought about it. I thought, okay, well, maybe I should go to newcomers class and just see what they have to say. And so this was like first week in February or something like that. So I go to this newcomers class, and Eddie, I'll never forget this, just like it was yesterday. I was sitting in the newcomers class listening, and it became evident. I mean, it's like I walked into a room that was pitch black and someone turned on the light. It was that stark to me that, and I was 40 years of age at the time. It became very clear in my heart and mind that I had lived the first 40 years of my life absolutely backwards. I mean, it was just that clear. And Linda was there that morning. I sat down next to her at church, and I said, Linda, I just realized I lived the first 40 years of my life absolutely backwards. And so after church, I went up and told Buck what had happened. And I said, Buck, I don't know what to do next. And he goes, well, have you ever been baptized? I said, no. He goes, well, we need to start with getting you baptized. So I was baptized February 28th, 1999. And funny part of the story is I met my now wife on February 6th that year. Her sister worked for me, and we were having a gathering of one of the franchise organizations at my home. And Kitty, my wife, was coming down from Fort Worth. She lived in Fort Worth, was an executive in Lockheed Martin. And her sister Janice says, hey, my sister's going to be in town. Can I bring her with me tonight? I said, sure. I didn't think much about it. So that's in that time frame, God brought this incredible Catholic woman into my life. So I became a Christian, and Buck started coming by my office every week. We had an appointment every week, come to my office, and we'd study scripture. And just my personality, once I dive into something, I dive in. I started reading books and books and books and listening to stuff. And about the same time, not too long after being baptized, a good friend of mine here in town, an attorney, David Alford, called me and said, "Hey, Robert, this guy speaking at Columbus Avenue Baptist Church, a guy named Patrick Morley, he wrote this book called Man in the Mirror. You really ought to come and hear him speak." So I did. And that's where I met Patrick Morley. And Pat and I struck up a relationship. And over time, as he started growing his ministry out, we got familiar with my franchising background. And he asked me to come and attend a session that they were doing, a training session for ministry to men around the country, down in Orlando, just to observe. So I did. And while I was there, I'll back up and catch up. But interesting thing, while I was there, I was in my hotel room that Friday night praying and reading. And God put two things on my heart. He said, go back and get Man in the Mirror going in Waco, and get Ministry to Men going in the Austin diocese. Now, Eddie, I wasn't Catholic. This was about 2002-ish or something like that. Mm-hmm. Couldn't spell Catholic. Never occurred to me to become Catholic. And because my wife, she humored me. Sometimes we got married in October of 2000. And which is a really fascinating story. She said she never quit her job and moved to Waco. She had two daughters that were out of high school, just out of high school. And she said, I'm done raising children. You have two young children. I mean, so we dated for just a few months, and then we stopped dating because we were on different paths.
Sure.
But the Holy Spirit intervened and, quit her job, ultimately sold her house and moved to Waco. And we have been married 21 years this year. Been a blessing. So she would humor me though. And sometimes we'd go to my church. Sometimes we'd go to Catholic church. And ultimately, we just started going to the Catholic church all the time. And never thought about becoming Catholic, got involved with the little men's group there, Men of St. Jerome's. And just, I would go up and receive communion. Nobody knew I wasn't Catholic. Nobody ever asked me. And so about, it was 2004. 2003, the men wanted to have a camp out. And I said, well, we can do it at my place. We have 28 acres. So they came out, and this was like May-ish or something like that, 2003. And we're sitting around the campfire that night talking, and Father Don was there. And they said, hey, Robert, why don't you share your story with us? We don't really know your story. So I did. And all of a sudden, they all look at me and realize I'm not Catholic. And but Father Don says something that was very moving to me. He said, Robert, he goes, I would not deny you communion. And that really was moving to me. So the next morning, a guy came up, a guy a little bit older than I was, and Chuck Felderhoff. He says, can I talk to you, Robert? Oh, sure, Chuck. And he goes, have you ever thought about going to RCIA? I said, don't know what it is, Chuck. And he explained to me what it was. And I said, so one night a week for 3 hours for 7 months? I said, I'll think about it. And he said, Robert, you really shouldn't go up for communion. And he explained to me why. And I looked at him and said, okay, well, I'll think about it, Chuck. So my wife and I talked about it, and she said, "Yeah, it's now that people know you're not Catholic, because I'm sure it's gonna run through the church pretty well."
Of course. Yeah.
And so I quit going up for communion and decided I was going to go to RCIA in the fall, not with the intention of being Catholic, just to learn. And Chuck volunteered to be my sponsor. So I remember going to the first class. Kitty went with me to the first class, the introductory class. And I can remember going out driving home, and I tell her, I said, "Kitty, I don't think there's anybody in that class that really wants to be there. They're either getting married to a Catholic or they're already married to a Catholic, but I don't think anybody really wants to be there." But I decided to go for it. And I told the teacher, I said, "Look, you can tell me what you believe all day long, but if you can't tell me why, I doubt you believe it." And so my mindset was, I'm going to go to class and I'm going to study. I'm going to go with all the questions I have and just dive into it. Yeah. And I did. And I stumped him a few times, but Chuck was really great. And he, like the second class, he pulled me aside and says, "Robert, now there are some mysteries." And I said, "Can't be any mysteries, Chuck. It's got to be, everything's got to be clear."
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And he says, "Well, there are some mysteries that you won't understand." And I said, "Okay, we'll see." And I did. I dived in, and I would go home at night and say, "Hey, Kitty, did you know this, 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 this?" And about middle of the way, they played this as a VHS then by Dr. Scott Hahn, The Lamb's Supper. And Eddie, it came together. Boom. This is the truth. The Catholic Church is the truth. And then I started reading the early church fathers and, learning. And so Deacon Ray Carter, that was teaching the class part of it, I went to him and I said, "Okay, I think I want to be Catholic." And he goes, "Well, okay, you've been married before?" I said, "Yeah, twice." And he goes, "How about your wife?" I said, "Yeah, she was married twice too." And he goes, we've got to get these marriages annulled. And because she was never married in the church, hers were very easy. She was like signing, the priest just signed off on them.
Sure.
And it's really funny, Eddie. The first time I was married, she was 16, I was 17. I was married in the Catholic Church. Yeah.
Oh.
So anyways, and if my second wife hadn't have been baptized, I would have had no issues at all, really, because I had baptized in my two marriages. But anyway, so I had to go through two annulments, which is rather challenging.
Really?
Yeah, one's enough, two. And so I kind of got tired of the process and just let it set. So when Easter came around, I couldn't come into the church. And that was just like, it was painful. So I decided I'm going to get this done. So this was early 2004. And I had most of the paperwork filled out and everything. And none of my ex-wives were opposed to getting the annulments. I was still on terms with them, good terms. So, but my life was kind of complex, my first 40 years. And finally, Deacon said, "Look, Robert, I think you need to write out your first 40 years and explain all this, because the documents are not going to be able to explain it.
Sure.
So I wrote an 11-page letter outlining my first 40 years. And we put it with the paperwork. So sent it off, and lo and behold, it's late September, both of my marriages were annulled. And Deacon Carter said, Robert, I've never seen a marriage get annulled so fast. He goes, that's incredible. But they were both annulled. So 2004, I came into the church. Our marriage was blessed, and full communion with the church.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great. And Kitty, once I started RCIA, she quit going to communion also, because we both agreed that we weren't living in a state of grace, obviously.
Got it.
So she quit going up for communion also. And so it was really, becoming Catholic was an incredible experience. And let me back up. We did, a couple guys and I did get a Bible study going called Man in the Mirror here in Waco. We had about 80 guys gathering every Thursday. I rented a meeting room at the Hilton, and it was all denominations. A friend of mine had a small church here, and he did the teaching, and I just did the organizing.
Yeah.
So, I really learned ministry to men through Man in the Mirror. And Pat and I continue to have a very close relationship. And he asked me to be on his board. And I said, Pat, I really can't, as long as I'm in business, I'm just don't have the time to devote to it. But I met, let's see. So 2005, fall of 2005, I got a call from then Bishop Amon, and was his assistant, and he wanted to have dinner with Kitty and I. So I told Kitty, hey, Kitty, I got a call from the bishop. He wants to have dinner with us. She goes, how'd you get a call from a bishop? I've been Catholic all my life. I've never got a call from a bishop. And I said, Kitty, no, I did. I never met a bishop before. So fall of 2005, we go down to have dinner with Bishop Amon, who's now Archbishop Amon of New Orleans. And so I go down and I have my legal pad, and this whole thing wrote out about how there's no ministry going on in the Austin diocese, and here's what we need to do.
Yeah.
And he looks at me and says, do it, Robert. And I said, okay. That really wasn't what I was wanting to say. That was just, I was giving him the game plan. So, and at the end, I asked him, is there anything I can do for you, Bishop? And he goes, yeah, we're starting a capital campaign. I need a lead donor. I'd like you to write me a good check. And I figured out why he asked me to dinner. And the thing that amazed me is that two things. One, first off, what makes you think I'd write you a check like that? Yeah. Secondly, what makes you think I can? But I told him we'd pray about it and discuss it. I thought Kitty was going to fall out of her chair. But we talked about it on the way home from Austin, and she was comfortable with it. So I called Bishop next day and said, hey, I'll support you in it. So, we launched the Central Texas Fellowship of Catholic Men in June of 2006. We did a kickoff meeting here in Waco. Another part of the story, Patrick Morley, once I became Catholic, he introduced me to a gentleman that he knew. His name's Maurice Bloomberg, who has since passed away, who was the executive director of an organization back then called the National Fellowship of Catholic Men. And so Maurice and I had struck up a relationship, and really started getting involved with him. He was actually a Jewish convert to Catholicism.
Wow.
And he flew in from Maryland and spoke at the kickoff. And really a amazing man. That's where I met a lot of other guys around the country that were Catholic. There was men around the country that were involved with the National Fellowship of Catholic Men. Kevin O'Brien, who's on our board, Dan Spencer, who's a regional leader of ours, and just a good group of men. And worked with Maurice and supported the organization. Ultimately, the organization dissolved because they just didn't know what they were wanting to do. But we just continued to do ministry to men, and I stayed in contact with a lot of the men. And so as time went on and the Central Texas Fellowship of Catholic Men grew, today we're in like 43 parishes in Central Texas. We're coming up on our 9th annual men's conference, July 10th. We've had 12 annual men's mass. And so really been bearing great fruit.
What's the core objective of the whole program? Is it similar to Man in the Mirror? Because I definitely want you to talk about that as well.
It's really just, we want minister men going on in as many parishes as we can, meeting weekly. And here's the thing that is so critical. Ministry to men works when men gather on a weekly basis and they build relationships. I mean, if you think about ministry to men, yes, you grow spiritually, you do different lessons and stuff, and you grow in your faith. But you build relationships, real relationships with other men. And so that's what we do. We have ministry to men going in 43 parishes now in the diocese. And so you think about ministry to men in America, North America. That's what these men that I stayed in contact with, we started talking in early 2018. They said, I think we need to do something. So a bunch of us met in Milwaukee 3 years ago to talk about ministry to men. And all of us there decided, there was about 60 men there. We decided that we needed to form an organization to get ministry to men going in every diocese. Because even today, there's only ministry to men going on in about 25% of the dioceses in North America. So we launched the Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance. And we have our next summit coming up. It starts this Friday, actually, in Columbus, Ohio. And so we've built an organization, and the goal is to have ministry to men going on in all the dioceses in North America and beyond. We have a team of men on the board. Father Larry Richards is on our board, Deacon Harold Brooks Sivers. We have a great guy in Canada, Sean Lynn, who's one of the founders of God Squad up there in Canada. And we got a great board. And the Catholic Church is divided up into regions here in America. There's 14 regions divided in the diocese. Regions divided up in the states and then in the diocese. So we've built out a team of regional leaders. And now we're building out the state leaders. And we have leaders in certain dioceses. And our goal is to build out a team of leaders, of men, to facilitate getting ministry to men going in all the dioceses.
Got it. So the alliance, so the alliance exists to take what you did in Central Texas and make it a national thing, and make sure that 75% that has not been covered. Yeah, I think you said, right, 25% of the parishes are participating. So there are a lot of isolated men.
Right, exactly. And there's some good, Men of Christ up in Milwaukee. There's some very good ministry to men going on in in the Catholic Church around. The men in California, there's Southern California, Gil, who heads that up. Freddie and a group started it years ago. There's some very great ministry to men going on, but the dots weren't connected.
Sure.
Nobody knew who they were, and they just operated in silos. So we're bringing the resources and bringing them together to connect the dots. We launched a technology platform in October called Heroic Men. And one of the challenges in ministry to men is all the different ministry to men, they operate in silos.
Yes.
And which it's not optimal. So with the help of the Augustine Institute, we partnered with them, and they created a platform for us. And it's enabled us to bring ministry to men together. I mean, Steve Bowman, with That Man Is Used there, Exodus 90, Chris Stefanik. I mean, all the ministry to men are coming together on a common platform. And it makes it very easy. If you want to use the search program, if you want to use Into the Breach, you want to reach out to That Man Is You, you want to do Exodus 90, you want to connect with Chris and then Real Life Catholic. Yep. It's there. So, and it's free. Doesn't cost them anything. So we launched that as a technology platform to facilitate ministry to men, with the real goal, though, is that's just a tool. Boots on the ground, having leaders committed to ministry to men in the local parishes in every diocese. That's where it really happens. So ultimately, we want 2 leaders in every diocese throughout North America. So that's the army that we're building out. And this meeting coming up this weekend is bringing our leaders together and fine-tuning what we're doing, some spiritual renewal, and building our relationships as a team, because we couldn't meet last year, obviously.
Yeah.
So we're coming back together, all the leaders, and just fine-tuning it and everything. So looking forward to seeing everybody again, actually.
That's incredible. No, I applaud that effort. I have to admit, our area, Treasure Valley, Idaho, has some pretty strong beginnings with the men's ministry.
You have a guy there, Travis. Great guy. Alan, our regional leader for the Northwest, Alan from Seattle, he and Travis are very connected.
Yeah.
So you boys has got you had a conference earlier this year.
Yeah. The end of January. They just they do such a great job. And I've talked to a number of people. So like I told you, we moved here almost 2 years ago, and I've had a number of people say the exact same thing. We just moved. I didn't think I'd find this type of Catholic men's community. So it's happening. I love the fact that it's happening. But there are a group of men here that are on fire to get what you're talking about off the ground and really promote heroic men, and continue to get guest speakers to come to the Valley. A lot of exciting things happening for sure.
Yeah, just think what would happen if we had that going on in every diocese.
Yeah.
One of our foundational goals is to get 1 million men meeting on a weekly basis. Catholic men. That's our first kind of benchmark.
Well, I think back to when I was isolating myself, and if you look at whatever church you're going to, if they don't have a program that's active, you're going to use that as an excuse, and you're going to put it on the church. Oh, they don't have anything. I'll just stay here in the corner. But with what you're doing, there won't be those excuses, because these men will be talking about these programs, and they'll realize, just like Exodus 90, we did this just a few months ago with a group of 9 or 10 guys. We were all admitting we needed this. We need to talk about this. We can't, just let it go the rest of the year and then try to pick it back up. We got to, we got to stay in contact. So we got to do a better job at that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why, you know, and then we try to get men to realize you don't take the summer off.
Yeah.
You keep meeting, because when guys quit gathering, they fall away. And it's amazing to me how many Catholic men that I've met that were Catholic, cradle Catholics oftentimes,
Yeah.
and they weren't engaged in their faith. Yeah, did they go to mass? Yeah, but it was like it was not really meaningful. And when a man becomes on fire for his faith, it is just amazing how God will work through that man.
Yeah.
And the more men we can help get on fire for their faith, oh, the impact can be incredible.
Yeah, well, a lot of people talk about this. I've heard videos, countless videos about this. Oh, the reverts and the converts are on fire. Where are the cradles? Well, I'm hearing stories about cradle Catholics. One story I just heard, this gentleman in his early 20s was asked by a family member, "Will you be a godparent?" That question, he was just this, I guess, cafeteria Catholic. But
Right.
that one question lit a fire under him. I'm going to take this boy under my wing. I'm going to learn what the church teaches, why I believe what I believe. And
Yeah.
he is on fire, doing podcasts, doing all kinds of stuff, just because of that simple question.
Yeah.
Will you be my godparent, or will you be a godparent?
Yeah. Well, that's why we just this past weekend, we launched an initiative this year, Catholic Father's Day procession, Eucharist processions.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to do it every year throughout North America. And so this was the first annual one. We had, I don't know the full number yet, how many processions we had going on around the country.
Incredible.
So it's those things that men come alive. We had one here in Waco here, and it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And families were out there, the wives, the children.
Wow.
So, these are the things we need to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like I said, I applaud the fact that you put this together with a great group of men is phenomenal, because it's not going to just happen organically. We can admit that. To be tasked to bring this together and form an alliance is phenomenal. So
yeah, and I left my job of 44 years a year ago in October, so I could devote my full-time talents and treasures to this.
Awesome.
And so what I'm really doing is taking everything that I learned in my business career and applying it to ministry to men. And I told Pat with Man in the Mirror that when I left my career, I would join his board. So I kept my word, and a year ago, November, I joined Pat's board. And the great thing about Man in the Mirror, they're not about whether you're Catholic, whether you're Protestant, whatever. They're about all men. So I enjoy being a part of the board, and I learned so much from Man in the Mirror that we can bring over to Catholic men. So, it's probably a little bit selfish on my part. So, and they're happy to share everything they do. So, anyways, it's a great relationship.
No, just the fact that you can be together collaboratively is good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for that amazing testimony. I appreciate your time. Once again, thank you for everything that you're doing. At another time, maybe we can talk about, I'm just so fascinated about at 17, how you were getting clients that quickly to where you'd build the business and then sell it. But we'll have to save that for another time. I love the entrepreneurial spirit. Everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it. actually this, I hope, will be on the Heroic Men platform, and we can keep building the ministry. Part of men's ministry is also to have men hear testimonies from other men. So that's going to be a big focus coming up in the future. So until next time, take care and God bless. Bye.
Thank you, Betty.